Gyro, passionate Ohio State fan, asks, are you out on Larry Johnson? Who could replace him? If I am out on Larry Johnson. So let's start with the first point. I'm going to reference an Ohio State page that I follow as frequently as possible. Don't have a lot of time, but when I do have time, I enjoy watching Juck on Bucks. It's one of my favorite Ohio State shows, college football shows overall. I think, at least from my perspective, that he is the corn-crazed of Ohio State football, and corn-crazed is the Juck on Bucks to Nebraska football. High-quality channels. Recommend you check them out. The channel names are spelled exactly as it sounds in the first things that pop up when you search them up. So search up those channel names and give them a like, give them a subscription, hit the notification bell, and if you have the resources, even join their membership clubs, which are, pretty insightful, pretty cool. Anyway, he and I, we talk, we exchange information at times, and I imagine he's already shared this by now, but he shared with me some graphics that involved the current top 5 recruiting classes for 2025, which those players have mostly enrolled, if not they're going to enroll by the time the season kicks off, and also the 2024 recruiting classes. Larry Johnson's unit, the defensive ends and defensive tackles, in 2024, he recruited the 7th, 24th, and 90th best defensive line players, or defensive end and defensive tackles. I forget exactly how that's formatted, but no top 5 player in either the D end or D tackle room, and a player who was even the 90th best, which I'm presuming is a 3-star. In 2025, 9th best, 18th, 27th, 36th, 61st. So a little bit better, but at the same time entering 2025, you'd expect to get more bodies in the room because you have 4 seniors leaving. The entire starting D-line for Ohio State last year, all of whom were drafted, all of whom were near elite, great at the worst, and then absolute aliens at the end of the year at best, all of them gone. And then Hero Kanu transfers out, Mitchell Melton transfers out, they go to Texas and Virginia respectively, where I think, especially Mitchell Melton at Virginia, I think will succeed, have playing time, be in a good situation, will eat. So it's also expected that because these recruits can see that there is going to be playing time opening up and that there's going to be more roster spots available, they're going to be more open to joining that room because it won't be as loaded, because every room has its own cycle. It's X amount of seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, etc. You get the point, graduates. Ohio State has taken a, I would say almost to be frank, nosedive on defensive line recruiting. Last season, and this is in regards to blue chip ratio, which blue chip ratio can be gamed. You can game the blue chip ratio system. It can, for example, make you look better, or it can make you look worse than you actually are at recruiting. Just on a basic blue chip level, Ohio State's 2025 defensive line class, 50% of the players were blue chippers, and only one of them was top 10 at his position. Only 2 were top 20. It's not good. It's not good enough by Ohio State standards. When Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, when those schools are out recruiting you on the defensive line, and there are probably others, but I'm just talking about those, and that's been the case for multiple years now. And then you look at Penn State, and you look at Michigan, who they've lost more on the defensive line over the past 2-3 years than Ohio State has, and yet they've put more first-rounders and high-caliber players in the NFL. They've had defensive lines that have carried a higher upside to them in recent memory than Ohio State has. And at Ohio State, there's a reason why the secondary, for example, has the phrase best in America. Doesn't mean they are the best in America every year, but that's their standard. That's their goal. It's the same in every single position because it's Ohio State. They're the second best program since 2000. They're the second best of the 21st century, and there's an argument for them to be the best. And they're the most consistent program since World War II. So in terms of living up to the standard, Larry Johnson is not doing that. But does that mean I'm personally out on him? From an objective point of view, I can't say personally that he should have been axed after the season that he had in 2024. Does that mean that you can't apply any pressure to him at all and that he's untouchable? Well, of course not. Of course not. I mean, I thought that last season in 2024, the safety unit and the linebacker units were the ones that were overall the most impressive. Doesn't mean they were better than D-line, although I thought safety was. But in terms of improvement, in terms of consistency, in terms of getting better as the year went on, a linebacker, it was amazing seeing the growth of Cody Simon, for example. Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese looked good. The safeties were insane all season long. A credit to Caleb Downs and Ohio State for getting him in the portal, but Ransom was developed well. Hancock made the nice transition from corner to nickel. Corner was inconsistent, but good at a national level at the year's end. The D-line started off inconsistent, looked pretty mediocre in the Oregon game, but then they came through and really improved as the year went on. This is a big year for Larry Johnson because the recruiting has not been where it needs to be for several cycles now. And really the only thing that can redeem that is after you lose 4 starters, the unit reloads, does well, is top 10, top 15 nationally. And I give a little bit of grace there because of how many players are leaving. But at the same time, the current predicament of the D-tackle room, and I would even say the D-end room outside of the starters are good, but depth is concerning. That is the fault of the position coach. So I'm pretty close to being out on Larry Johnson. I'm not going to say yet that I quite am, because we'll find out during the season if the improvements on defense, especially a unit like the defensive line, I think, which made a night and day change from 2023 to 2024. We'll find out whether that was more because of Jim Knowles, who made, I would say, several schematic adjustments in the 2023 and 2024 seasons collectively. Like in that time frame, I think he made different adjustments, especially after the Oregon game in 2024. We'll find out whether the D-line improving was more so because of him or Larry Johnson pretty quickly, looking at that week 1 game against Texas, which should be a night game, just to quickly touch on that, but it is what it is. Texas has no incentive to move that game up to a Sunday at night. No incentive, so I don't blame them for saying no on that. And neither should you, in my mind. If you're Ohio State and you're at home, you should expect to beat Texas, regardless of the kickoff time. I know noon games are a pain, but that's a topic for another day. Larry Johnson's been at Ohio State since 2014. He's the ultimate Urban Meyer holder in the sense that he, along with Mickey Marotti and I believe Mark Petone, have been there since really Urban Meyer got there, although Johnson was hired 2 years after the fact. But he's been at Ohio State for over a decade. He's older, he's a legend, and at some point legends age, and they're no longer the same coaches or even players that they were. You know, Randy Moss was awesome in the NFL, but he's no longer playing in the NFL. Why? Because you get old, you break down, others pass you. It's the sad cycle of life, but it's the reality. So I think in the near future, Larry Johnson will retire. Whether he will voluntarily or be forced to retire, he will. But that will be the title of the end of his tenure at Ohio State. He won't be fired. He'll just be forced into retirement because he is a legend and he deserves that level of respect. I'm mostly out on him, though, to answer the first part of the question. The second part of the question is who should replace him. This is going to be very brief because I don't know. The standard at Ohio State is so high that even names that I think are good might not fit what Day and Patricia, assuming that Patricia will be here beyond a season, which I don't know if that's the case because I think he is more of an NFL guy. He loves recruiting. He loves it at Ohio State. I can tell those things for sure. But I think ultimately it's going to be more similar to the Chip Kelly move rather than, let's say, the Jim Knowles move, where if he has a really successful year this season, or even if it's just modestly successful, I think he'll be looking at NFL options, or at least the NFL will be looking at options that include hiring him to be one of their team's next defensive coordinator, if that makes sense. I think that Alan Clark at Texas, who was Larry Johnson's assistant and protege for 2 seasons as an assistant D-line coach, I think hiring him would be fantastic. It'd be big because you'd be stealing away a highly prized assistant from not a rival in the traditional sense, but a rival in terms of competition, a rival of excellence. I think Pat Kuntz or Buda Williams at Indiana, the D tackle and DN coach for the Hoosiers respectively, either of them would be a fantastic hire. I think that Cignetti has one of the best staffs in America, and Indiana doesn't have Ohio State's resources. Although they've ponied up money for Cignetti, they've ponied up money for Bryant Haynes, they've ponied up money for their strength and conditioning coach, and I imagine other assistants like Mike Shanahan, for example. So maybe Indiana could fend Ohio State off. That sounds like alternate history, but it could be the reality. But you should still call them. It's the same thing with Alan Clark at Texas. If Texas wants him and they get on it, they can probably match Ohio State's offer, but you still make the call. Terrence Jamison, if his unit, after all they lose, has a big year at Illinois, I think that's definitely a rising name to consider. And then this is out of left field, but still, we've seen Ohio State and Michigan poach coaches before. Ironically enough, they didn't either work out or last all that long. Greg Madison retired shortly after Ohio State poached him. Al Washington overall was a disaster. And Tony Alford, honestly, it looked like Ohio State won that war, where they upgraded at running backs coach. And Michigan, I think, got a good running backs coach, but someone who I don't know and I don't think they are as good as Ohio State's Carlos Loughlin, who they got from Oregon. But still, Lou Esposito, I think, is one of the best D-line coaches in the business in terms of development. At Ohio State, you'll get a recruiting edge over what you already have at Michigan. You have good NIL, and you have a defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia, who right now is actually trying to help out Larry Johnson recruit and is involved in recruiting, unlike Jim Knowles, the prior DC. So maybe you just offer him a boatload of money if he does well after Michigan lost three NFL draft picks, 2 of them in the first round, and their unit does well. Why not? Maybe it can help get the mental edge back over Michigan. I think that would be a fantastic move by Ohio State, honestly, if they were to pull that off and, in my opinion, steal away Michigan's best assistant coach right now in Lou Esposito. So those are some names just to float out there. Ultimately, 2025 will decide Larry Johnson's fate, whether or not the defensive line is a strength or weakness on defense or on the team as a whole. It doesn't look too good right now by Ohio State standards, but only time will tell, and you'll know pretty quickly against Texas, who they lose a bunch on the O-line, yes, but depth is not a concern for the Texas offensive line with how they've recruited and with how they've developed. Not a concern one bit. So they're going to go up against a competent unit and a good quarterback and a great staff and an awesome roster in week 1. You will know a lot about each Ohio State position group right out of the gate, which is good if you want answers about the team. And, as a fan of a team in Michigan who's had to go through pretty weak non-conference schedules or even weak conference schedules and wait until November to figure out who exactly you are, sometimes it's just refreshing to know out of the gate, like Michigan with Texas last year, this is the level we are capable of winning at. And anything beyond that, we're not capable of winning right now. We're capable of being this team, but not this team. Ohio State will get that same experience in 2025. Don't think they'll get the same result in that you'll realize, 8-4 is probably the best case scenario, or maybe 9-3. I don't think it will be that way, but you'll have the same result in that you will know who your team is in large part after the first few weeks of September, or in this case, the first week of September. That will also apply to Larry Johnson's unit. I think there are plenty of quality candidates who could be upgrades over him, who could replace him, and some of them are at schools where they don't have the purchasing power and they don't have the retention power that Ohio State does. So they could go out to a smaller school, get a higher quality coach, and make an upgrade without having much competition. And that's probably what will happen, or maybe they'll go out of the box. I mean, I didn't see Matt Patricia coming. I don't think a lot of people did until news was reported that it was basically when, not if. So to answer your question, I'm close to being out on him, Gyro. And as for who should replace him, I think that's too early of a question to answer. There's a lot of capable names, and Ohio State will select one of them.